by and large, physicians are not big entrepreneurs as a rule. And
Right.
when they were was prior to ACA. They were much, much more interested in owning their own practice. But when that entered, all of a sudden that tide changed, like flip-flopped the opposite way. So
Mhm.
that's my experience in my 35 years.
Yeah, great points, Tony. And I can't wait to see what this is going to look like on our art board here. But one of the questions was for that to make that first impression, do you bring a spouse to the interview? You know, if it's that community tour that you talk about so much. And one of the people here in the audience already said the spouse can make or break the interview. So what's your experience with that? What are your thoughts about it?
Absolutely. When you're recruiting, when there's a couple coming to your community, you need to almost, this is the matchmaking piece that I was talking about. I don't know how many of you fix your best friends up with their current wives. I've done it 3 times, and it's really interesting, very similar in this situation, because you're trying to anticipate and get all the information you can about the family before they come on site. Then your job is to say, let me find couples, especially when you're going to do social events like a dinner or something of that nature. You want to try and find people who have like interests, maybe people who have children a similar age, people who have hobbies that might be similar to what the candidate is interested in. So you're kind of matchmaking those things, but you do it in a limited fashion. One of the mistakes that I see people make, they think they're doing the right thing by saying, we're going to have a big dinner for the family when they're coming in, and they have 10 couples sitting at a large table, and invariably the physician and the spouse always end up right next to the people that you really don't necessarily want them sitting next to, who aren't the biggest proponents of your practice or maybe the best fit. Instead, you really want to narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 couples at the most who are going to meet with them and who have the most things in common, so they can be there to be salespeople for your practice, salespeople for your community. And as I said in my earlier discussion, one of the things that physicians will say is that somebody either physically or mentally put their arm around them and said, y'all come on over, this is going to be fine. We got you. You're going to be successful here, and your family's going to be very happy. We'll make sure you're taken care of. So those are the things that you want them thinking when they leave. And you have to work yourself backwards to say, who are going to be the people that are going to bring those points across? And every candidate is going to be different. You know, you may get somebody a family that's empty nesters, or you may find somebody that has 2 newborns. You just never know. So you're planning on who the couples that are going to be meeting with them can change from candidate to candidate.
Mm-hmm. We've got an interesting question here. They have an issue. We're seeing a seasoned physician interested in moving to our community and expecting to get paid what they make where they are now. But there's a problem. I know you've seen this, Tony. The problem is they will not bring their patients with them as they are from another city. How best to address this issue that is fair to both sides?
Yeah, that's really a good question. Part of the problem in the world of physician recruitment, and I see no end in sight or no way to fix it, and that's the physician shortage. So every practice, every hospital that's competing for physicians are looking for. There's way more jobs out there than there are physicians to fill it. Let's put it that way. So you are in a competitive market to the point where I wonder sometimes if the regulations on what you can pay physicians is ever really going to change, if that's ever going to open up to free agency like it does in other areas of the world. You've seen salary rates continue to increase year over year over year, as you can see in the benchmarks from MGMA, of course. But those things will probably continue to rise. Now, here's the problem you have with a seasoned physician. I don't know that's necessarily a problem, because actually it might be a good thing for you to kind of put in perspective. People are typically creatures of habit, and somebody who's seasoned and been around for quite a while is probably used to seeing a certain patient load. So if it's a family practitioner and they're used to seeing 25 to 30 patients a day for the last 25 years, and they're going to make a change to your community, they typically are going to work to that same level that they've been accustomed to working. They're not going to go way above, they're not going to go way below. This is their comfort zone. That's what they've been doing for a long time. So seasoned physicians are in many cases easier to see that level of interest, that level of participation that you might anticipate coming forward. When physicians move in the real world today, the way that they look at it and the way we speak with them is to say two things. One is, what do you need as a guarantee the first year to be able to make sure that you can pay the bills, we don't have to worry about anything, and you're comfortable getting things started. But once you get in and get your practice level up to where it needs to be after year one, then what do you want to be making? When you see that and they understand what your RVU model is, they're going to be able to discern either I can hit that or I can't. Because believe it or not, especially a seasoned doctor is most likely not going to want to move to your community, soak a guarantee up for a year, and then move on to another location. That's too much upheaval in their mind and their what they're comfortable with. So they're usually going to work to that level. So my advice would be able to get as much information on what they've done. Probably going to have to bite the bullet for the first year to be able to give them something that's competitive, because no one's going to move halfway across the country and take a significant pay cut to join another group, unless they just have a specific reason for wanting to go someplace. If they say, I have to go here and I really don't care what the starting salary is and I'll just make what I earn, then you may see that. But for the most part, because right now physicians are conditioned to be able to know that they're in demand and that they can demand certain guarantees that are reasonable within expectations of stated salaries. So I hope that explains it. But if you get a seasoned physician that's been seeing a fair amount of patients and that's what they're accustomed to, and they're not indicating that they're looking to slow down, then you're probably going to be safe. You may just have a short-term investment that you make that may be tough to recoup unless they stay there long enough.
Mm-hmm. We've got a great question from Catherine. It's just hitting the bottom line here. How can individual practices compete against the big salaries from hospital groups? That's our biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I work with a lot of small groups as well. And here's the thing, what you find, if you've been doing this long enough, you find that I always find recruiters who think that they're great predictors and that they can just look at something and say, oh, this is going to be almost impossible to fill, or this should be easy to fill. And it never ends up turning out that way. It ends up saying that, we've actually recruited physicians to practices. We did one recently in Dallas to a physician who said, look, I can't guarantee anything, but this practice is amazing. They can come in and hit the ground running immediately. And here's my books. Here's what I know they can make if they come in and just want to work. And we thought this is going to be difficult to impossible to be able to fill. And we filled it in 60 days. So you just don't know. Sometimes it's just doing enough outreach and being able to hit enough people to find the right person to fill that role. But to be able to put yourself in a better position to compete, what you have to do if you don't have the big bucks to compete with a hospital that's going to be offering $50,000 more, you have to figure out what your strengths are, what you bring to the table that perhaps they don't. And you have to be able to show a path to a physician to say, here's what our current physicians make. Here's what the availability of money is once you hit these numbers. And if you're willing to do the work, I can show you what you're going to be making. We've got the work available. Perhaps in some cases, we have a 3-month backlog in your specialty. You're going to hit the ground running the day you walk in. Your schedule is going to get filled right away. And while we can't guarantee this, we can say this is what you'll be making in our RVU model if you're hitting 25 patients a day or 35 patients a day or whatever your metrics are. Just make sure that you have a good story to be able to help them see themselves where they can be. And then make them, as we said earlier, make them feel like this is the place to be, the culture they want to be in, and the people they want to work with.
Mm-hmm. Amanda has a question that is related. She says and asks, we find it difficult to recruit to the rural setting that I live in. What is your experience in recruiting for rural, and what tips might you have for that?
Great deal. You came to the right place. I cut my teeth in rural recruiting. Jackson and Coker originally back in the 70s was the original recruitment firm, and pretty much all we did was rural hospitals back then. And it's transformed over the years, but we still do probably 40% of our business is based in rural communities. And it's just a different art as to how you sell it. And it's trying to find the right person. So here's an interesting statistic. The stats say that in surveys, only 10% of physicians in the US say that they're interested in working in a rural community. And I'm guessing her community is probably smaller than what's defining rural community, because usually that's 40,000 people or less. You know, we recruit sometimes in towns of 5,000 people. So, you know, if that small a pool is interested in doing it, that shows that there's a huge maldistribution in physicians. And shortage is one thing, maldistribution is another. When 20% of the country is rural and only 10% of the physicians want to fill those positions, that's a big problem. So
Yeah.
you have to figure out what you're appealing to, the type of person you're appealing to, and figure out, again, what your pitch is, how you're going to advertise, how you're going to speak to those people and show them the advantages. You know, in some cases over my career, I've been able to paint a picture for people who are, let's say, in Western Nebraska, in a small town in Western Nebraska, to be able to say, yes, you've got this, you've got advantages of cost of living, you've got advantages of safe community, of great school system. At the same time, you can be doing world-class skiing in less than a 6-hour drive in the mountains of Colorado. You know, you can do these kind of things. So you're really painting a picture for people and showing them how much further the money they can make in that area can go than if they were living in a major city. So you just have to get your presentation down and realize, and don't get too frustrated, because still the vast majority of people are not going to move to rural community, but you have to learn how to sell that. So it's an art. It really is. And it's also, as they say in the old days, kissing enough frogs to get a prince. You've got to be able to reach a lot of people to be able to pitch your opportunity, because you'll get a lot of no's. So just, you got to stay persistent, and you got to keep your head up and don't get discouraged.
Yeah. From Bill, we have another question that delves into that ownership model, looking at it from a different angle though. Should a seasoned physician be offered a shorter track to partnership than a physician coming out of residency? And then what is the standard track? What does that look like?
Good. Again, all these are great questions. I just went over this recently with one of my major Georgia clients, and their track to partnership is 2 years. And there's multiple things that they enlist when they're trying to evaluate whether somebody's eligible for partnership or whether they'll be voted in for partnership. Usually they make it pretty consistent, because what you don't want to have is things, you don't want to start having discrimination issues and reasons why somebody may, because you like them better or whatever. There has to be metrics and things that go around that. I would say that in most cases, people coming out of residency they are on a little longer track than a seasoned physician. Our client that I just mentioned, while they have a 2-year track, I've seen them make exceptions for people to have a 1-year track. I've never seen them bring somebody straight in to offer partnership, but I have seen them shorten it to a 1-year track. But that usually takes a vote to be able to before they extend the offer to the physician. So that's how they've done it. I don't know that there's a strict, hard, fast rule. I know my friends at the Coker Group do a really good job of helping people advise in those areas, much more so than we do. You know, we're more about the nuts and bolts of the recruitment, but that certainly is a part of the recruitment sell, if you will. But you know, so I would say, as a rule, if the major question was to say, do residents typically have a longer track to partnership than somebody who's seasoned, the answer would be yes.
Okay, I had to unmute myself there. I was trying to not interfere with you as well, Tony. It looks like we might have time for one more question here, maybe two, we'll see. But what are your thoughts about a single on-site interview process versus a multiple interview process? I know you guys put together a white paper that talked about this, you know, what happens from that first interview, the decisions that are made. So fill us in on that.
Yeah, that's really the crux of what our business is. I mean, we preach the value of the single interview process. Now, I will tell you, there are occasions when it's not possible, but we look for very outside the box reasons why that could happen. So there may be something that has to do with certain specialties that may have to come back for additional on-site work, or to scrub in on surgeries, or to do things like that. There are things that are extenuating circumstances that you can't get around. But by and large, if your homework is done on the front end, and you set the physician up right, and what I mean by that is not trying to catch them, but to say, listen, we want to make sure everything is addressed, because the goal is by the time you walk away from the interview, that you're either going to know this is the right place, or hey, it was a great visit, but it's not the right place for us. So if you set people up with that in their mind and set a time frame for what expectations are, you should be able to address everything. One of the key mistakes that I see people make is that they allow a physician to come on their own for a first interview and then come back with the spouse. And as I said in my earlier presentation, they can practice anywhere in the country. It's not going to look, once they get inside the building, they're not going to know what state or what coast they're on. So they're just going to go in and they're going to do the same practice. But if they come home and their spouse is unhappy, or the kids are getting beat up at school because nobody likes them because they talk with a different accent or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
if the family's unhappy, the physician's going to be miserable, and they're not going to be there long. So you just want to make sure that 70% of your interview process is based on the family, on the spouse. If you're not doing that, if you're not paying attention with that kind of shift, then you're missing the point, and you're probably going to miss out on the candidate.
Great points. Tony, I love talking to you and learning from you about what's going on in the recruitment and retention and retirement of physicians out there. And so thank you so much for this. And I want to thank again the participants here. Wow, these were, as you know, Tony, these were some pretty challenging and pretty awesome questions. So thank everybody. And then again, let's all just take a minute to look at this piece of art. I couldn't draw anything beyond a stick figure, and I am amazed at what you're able to create there in real time as we're talking. So thanks, everyone. And remember to visit the Solution Center to find partners that will address the topic in today's session. Thank you all so much. Thank you again, Tony. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.